Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more in the Buddha's words. Today, we will be starting chapter 8, reading the introduction. And the chapter is called Mastering the Mind. So, yeah, that said, let's get into this. Having presented a broad overview of the world-transcending path in the previous chapter, in this chapter and the next, I intend to focus on more specifically on two aspects of the path as described in the Nikayas, meditation and wisdom. As we have seen, the gradual training is divided into three sections of moral discipline, concentration, and wisdom. Moral discipline begins with the observance of precepts, which anchor one's actions in principles of conscientious behavior and moral restraint. The undertaking of precepts for the Nikayas, particularly the full code of monastic precepts, is called the training on the higher moral discipline, the adhisi lasaka. Moral discipline consistently observed infuses the mind with the purifying force of moral virtue, generating joy and deeper confidence in the Dhamma. Established upon the moral discipline, the discipline takes up the practice of meditation, intended to stabilize the mind and clear away obstacles to the unfolding of wisdom. Because meditation elevates the mind beyond its normal level, this phase of practice is called the training of the higher mind. Hisataksika, because it brings inner stillness and quietude. It is also called the development of serenity. Successful practice results in deep concentration or mental unification, also known as internal serenity of the mind. To most eminent types of concentration recognized in the Nikayas are the four jhanas, which constitute right concentration of the Noble Eightfold Path. Beyond the jhanas lie the four formless attainments, which carry the process of mental unification to still subtler levels. And the third stage of practice is the training in the higher wisdom, designed to awaken direct insight into the true nature of things as disclosed by the Buddha's teaching. This will be dealt with in detail in the following chapter. The first selection below is a miscellany of short episodes that stress the need for mental cultivation. The sayings occur in pairs. In each pair, the first member signals the dangers of the uncultivated mind. The second extols the benefits of the cultivated mind. The uncultivated mind is an easy prey to the defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion of their offshoots. The defilements generate unwholesome karma, which brings painful results both in this life and in future lives. Since the defilements are the cause of our suffering and bondage, the path to liberation necessarily involves a meticulous process of mental training intended to subdue them and ultimately uproot them from their nesting place in the deep recesses of the mind. From development of the mind arise the happiness, freedom, and peace. development of the mind for the Nikayas means the development of serenity and insight. Chapter 8, Part 2, Section 1 says when serenity is developed, it leads to concentration and the liberation of the mind from such emotional defilements as lust and ill will. When insight is developed, it leads to higher wisdom and the insight into the true nature of phenomena and permanently liberates the mind from ignorance. Thus, the two things most needed to master the mind are serenity and insight. Since concentration is the basis for wisdom, the Nikayas usually treat the development of serenity as the precursor to the development of insight. However, because the aptitudes of meditators differ, several suttas allow for alternative approaches to this sequence. Chapter 8, Section 2, Part 2 speaks on the four approaches to mental cultivation. Since concentration, the first approach, the classical one, is to develop serenity first and insight afterward. By serenity is meant the jhanas, or a state bordering on the jhanas called access or threshold concentration. 2. A second approach is to develop insight and serenity afterward. Since there can be no insight without concentration, such meditators, presumably people with sharp intellectual faculties, must initially use concentration as the basis for acquiring insight into the true characteristics of phenomena. However, it seems that such concentration, though sufficient for insight, is not strong enough to allow for a breakthrough in the supramundane path. These meditators must therefore speak to the task of unifying the mind before resuming the work of insight. Such insight based on concentration culminates in the supramundane path. 3. The third approach is to develop serenity and insight in tandem. Meditators who take this approach first attain a particular level of concentration, such as the jhana or formless attainment, and then employ it as a basis for insight. Having developed insight, by then return to concentration, attain a different jhana or formless attainment, and use that as a basis for insight. Thus, they proceed until they reach the supramundane path. And 4, the description of the fourth approach is somewhat obscure. The sutta says that a monk's mind is seized by agitation and the teachings, and then sometime later he gains concentration and attains the supramundane path. This statement suggests a person initially driven by such intense desire to understand the Dhamma that he or she cannot focus clearly upon any meditation object. Later, with the aid of certain supporting conditions, this person manages to subdue the mind, again, gain concentration, and attain the supramundane path. Chapter 8, Section 2, Part 3, again confirms that both serenity and insight are necessary and also indicates the skills needed for the respective practice. The cultivation of serenity requires skill in steadying, composing, unifying, and concentrating the mind. The cultivation of insight requires skill in observing, investigating, and discerning conditioned phenomena spoken of as formations. In line with the preceding text, this sutta confirms that some meditators begin by developing internal serenity of the mind, others by developing a higher wisdom of insight into phenomena, others by developing both in tandem. But while meditators may start off differently, eventually they must strike a healthy balance between serenity and insight. The exact point of balance between the two will differ from one person to another, but when a meditator achieves the appropriate balance, serenity and insight join forces to issue in the knowledge and vision of the Four Noble Truths. This knowledge and vision, the world transcending wisdoms, occur in four distinct installments. The four stages of realization, which in four distinct the knowledge and vision, the world transcending wisdom, occurs in four distinct installments. The four stages of realization, which in sequence permanently destroy ignorance along with the affiliated defilements. Chapter 8, Section 2, Part 2 subsumes these defilements under the expression the fetters of underlying tendencies. The main impediments to the development of serenity and insight are collectively called the five hindrances, which we already met in the extended account on the gradual training. Chapter 8, Section 3 states that just as different impurities of water prevent us from seeing clearly the reflection of our face in a bowl of water, so the five hindrances prevent us from properly understanding our own good and the good of others. A meditator's initial efforts, therefore, have to be devoted to the task of overcoming the hindrances. Once these are overcome, success is assured in the practice of serenity and insight. Chapter 8, Section 4, compares the successive stages of the purification of the mind to the refinement of gold. The meditating monk gains the removing of gross impurities of bodily, verbal, and mental conduct. This is achieved by moral discipline and vigilant introspection. When he eliminates the middle-level impurities of unwholesome thoughts, thoughts of sensuality, ill will, and harmfulness, next come the subtle impurities of meandering thoughts. Finally, he must eliminate thoughts about the Dhamma, the subtlest obstacle. When all such distracting thoughts are removed, the monk attains mental unification, the basis for the six direct knowledges, culminating in arahantship and the knowledge of the destruction of the taints. The Nikayas sometimes compare the process of training the mind to the taming of a wild animal. Just as the animal trainer has to use various techniques to bring the animal under control, the meditator has to draw upon various methods to subdue the mind. It is not enough to be acquainted with one meditation technique. One must be skilled in a number of methods intended as antidotes to specific mental obstructions. Chapter 8, Section 5, the Buddha explains 5 ancillary techniques, here called signs, that a monk might deploy to eliminate unwholesome thoughts connected with lust, hatred, and delusion. One who succeeds in overcoming distracting thoughts by the use of these techniques is called a master of the courses of thought. The suttas teach various techniques of meditation aimed at inducing concentration. One popular formula pits specific meditation subjects against the unwholesome mental states they are intended to rectify. Thus, the meditation of the unattractive nature of the body is the remedy for sensual lust. Loving kindness is the remedy for ill will. The mindfulness of breathing is the remedy for restlessness. And the perception of impermanence is the remedy for the conceit. I am, and the perception of impermanence is subject to slight insight meditation. The other three subjects are serenity meditation. Loving kindness is the first of the four divine abodes, or immeasurable states, briefly discussed in Chapter 5. Boundless loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. These are respectfully the antidotes to ill will, harmfulness, discontent, and partiality. Since we already introduced the Stanford canonical passage in the Divine Abodes in connection with meditation as a basis for merit, to shed a different spotlight on this practice, I have included here as in chapter 8, section 6, the famous simile of the saw, a passage that shows loving kindness in action. Through the centuries, the most popular meditation subjects among lay Buddhists have probably been the 6 recollections of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, morality, generosity, and the Devas. Chapter 8, section 7 is an important canonical source for these meditations. Their themes are especially close to the hearts and everyday experiences of people living household lives in a culture imbued with Buddhist values. The meditation practices in turn enrich and uplift their lives, bringing them into closer spiritual contact with the ideas of a religious faith. The first 3 are primarily devotional collections that build upon confidence in the 3 jewels. While they begin with faith, they temporarily cleanse the mind of defilements and conduce to sustained concentration. The meditation on moral discipline develops from one's observance of the precepts, a practice aimed at self-benefit. The recollection of generosity builds upon one's practice of giving and altruistic practice. The recollection of the Devas is a contemplation of the fruits of one's path, morality, generosity, and wisdom as they mature into future lives. The discourse generally considered to offer the most comprehensive instructions on meditation practice is the Satipatthana Sutta. 2 versions of the sutta exist, a longer version in the Digha Nikaya, a middle-length version in the Majjhima Nikaya. The former differs from the latter only by the extended analysis of the 4 Noble Truths, which may have been originally been an early commentary incorporated into the discourse. The middle-length version is included in Chapter 8, Section 8. an entire chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Satipatthana Samyutta, is also devoted to this system of meditation. The Satipatthana Sutta does not recommend a single meditation subject, nor even a single method of meditation. Its purpose, rather, is to explain how to establish a mode of contemplation needed to arrive at realization of Nibbana, the appropriate frame of mind to be established, as implied by the title of the sutta, is called an establishment of mindfulness. The word satipatthana should probably be understood as a compound for sati, mindfulness, and upatthana, establishment. Hence, establishment of mindfulness would be the rendering that best captures the original meaning. According to the standard formula that accompanies each exercise, a satipatthana is a mode of dwelling. The mode of dwelling involves observation of objects in the proper frame of mind. The frame of mind consists of three positive qualities: energy, mindfulness, and clear comprehension. The word sati originally meant memory, but in the present context it signifies recollection of the present, a sustained awareness of what is happening to us and within us on each occasion of experience. Mindfulness in its initial stages is concerned with keeping the contemplative mind continually on its object, which means keeping the object continually present to the mind. Mindfulness prevents the mind from slipping away, from drifting off under the sway of random thoughts into mental proliferation and forgetfulness. Mindfulness is often said to occur in close conjunction with the clear comprehension, a clear knowledge and understanding of what one is experiencing. The opening formula of the sutta says that one engages in this practice after having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world. The expression "having subdued" need not be taken to imply that one must first overcome longing and dejection, which, according to the commentary, signify greed and aversion, and thus represent the five hindrances, before one can start to practice satipatthana. The expression might be understood to mean that the practice is itself the means of overcoming longing and dejection. Thus, while subduing the obstructive influences of greed and aversion, a meditator arouses the positive qualities of energy, mindfulness, and clear comprehension, and contemplates four objective domains: the body, feelings, states of mind, and phenomena. It is these four objective domains that differentiate mindful observation into the four establishments of mindfulness. The four objective domains divide the expository portion of the Satipatthana Sutta into four major sections. Two of these sections, the first and the fourth, have several subdivisions. When the divisions are added up, we obtain altogether 21 meditation subjects. Several of these can be used as means to develop serenity, but the Satipatthana system as a whole seems especially designed for the development of insight. The main sections with their divisions are as follows. 1. Contemplation of the body. This comprises 14 subjects of meditation, mindfulness of breathing, contemplation of the four postures, clear comprehension of activities, attention to the unattractive nature of the body, viewed by way of its organs and tissues, attention to the elements, and 9 charnel ground contemplations based on corpses in different stages of decomposition. 2. Contemplation of feeling. Feeling is differentiated into 3 primary types: pleasant, painful, and neither painful nor pleasant, which are each further distinguished into carnal and spiritual feelings. However, because these are all merely different types of feeling, the contemplation of feeling is considered one subject. 3. Contemplation of mind. This is the subject of contemplation, the mind, differentiated into 8 paths of contrasting states of mind. And 4. Contemplation of phenomena. The word Dhamma here probably signifies phenomena, which is classified into 5 categories governed by the Buddha's teaching, the Dhamma. Thus, Dhammanupassana has a dual meaning. Dhammas, phenomena, contemplated by way of the Dhamma, the teaching. The 5 categories are the 5 hindrances, the 5 aggregates, the 6 internal and external sense bases, and the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 4 noble truths. Although not specified in the sutta, a progressive sequence seems to be implied by the terms describing each contemplation. A mindfulness of breathing, one moves to subtler levels of quiescence. In contemplation of feeling, one moves to a toward non-carnal feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. In contemplation of mind, one moves toward states of mind that are concentrated and liberated. These all suggest that progressive contemplation brings enhanced concentration in the contemplation of phenomena. The emphasis shifts toward insight. One begins by observing and overcoming the 5 hindrances. The overcoming of the hindrances marks success in concentration, and with the concentrated mind, one contemplates the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense bases. As contemplation gains momentum, the 7 factors of enlightenment become manifest, and the development of the 7 enlightenment factors culminate in knowledge of the 4 noble truths. Knowledge of the 4 noble truths liberate the mind from the defilements and thus lead to the attainment of Nibbana. Thus, the system of meditation fulfills the potential ascribed to it by the Buddha of leading directly to the realization of Nibbana. Each major contemplative exercise is supplemented by an auxiliary section, a refrain with 4 subdivisions. The first states that the meditator contemplates the object internally within his or her own experience, externally, reflectively considering it as occurring within the experience of others, and both. This ensures that one obtains a comprehensive and balanced view of the object. The second portion states that the meditator contemplates the object as subject to origination, as subject to vanishing, and as subject to both origination and vanishing. This brings to light the characteristic of impermanence and thus leads to insight into the three characteristics: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. The third states that the meditator is simply aware of the bare object of the extant necessary for constant mindfulness and knowledge. And the fourth describes the meditator as dwelling in a state of complete detachment, not clinging to anything in the world. In the Satipatthana Sutta, mindfulness of breathing is included as merely one meditation, subject among others, but the Nikayas assign it as a position of fundamental importance. The Buddha said that he used mindfulness of breathing as his main meditation subject for the attainment of enlightenment. During his teaching career, he occasionally went into seclusion to devote himself to the concentration gained through mindfulness of breathing, and he confers on it a unique honor by calling it the Tathagata's dwelling. Mindfulness of breathing is the subject of the entire chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya, whereas the Satipatthana Sutta explains mindfulness of breathing by four-step formula. The suttas in this collection expand its practice to 16 steps from the Anapana Samyutta describes the 16 steps. Chapter 8, Section 9 from the Anapana Samyutta describes the 16 steps. Since these steps are not necessarily sequential but partly overlap, they might be thought to be the facets rather than actual steps. The 16 facets are grouped into 4 tetrads, each of which corresponds to one of the 4 establishments of mindfulness. The first tetrad contains the 4 facets mentioned in the Satipatthana Sutta in this section on contemplation of the body, but the other tetrads extend the practice into the contemplations of feelings, mind, and phenomena. Thus, the development of mindfulness of breathing can fulfill not just one but all 4 establishments of mindfulness. The 4 establishments of mindfulness based on mindfulness of breathing in turn fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment, and these in turn fulfill true knowledge and liberation. This exposition thus shows mindfulness of breathing to be a complete subject of meditation that begins with simple attention to the breath and culminates in the permanent liberation of the mind. Finally, in Chapter 8, Section 10, the Buddha's chief disciple, the Venerable Sariputta, testifies to his own achievement of mastery over the mind. In reply to questions from the Venerable Ananda, he explains how he was able to dwell for a whole day in each of the jhanas and formless attainments, as well as in the special attainment called the cessation of perception and feeling. In each case, because he is an arahant, he can do so without grasping these attainments with thoughts of I and mind. But yeah, that ends the reading of the introduction. Woo! Had a period there where I had to pause because I got a call and had to answer it, but yeah. We get the internet introduction to chapter 8 read, and it is starting to get in depth with going beyond just the beginnings that we have read thus far. Because we know about the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, the jhanas, the suttas, the nikayas. And here we get into the actual base of the Buddha describing how you move forward and gain better liberation and knowledge and concentration, mindfulness. So yeah. Whew. But with that, we'll go ahead and end this episode here, as we'll be getting into the first part of chapter 8, the first section, in the next episode. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting no sources in the video because I don't have any. We're just reading. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.